Welcome back, nerds. Fino here with a guide for Huang Feihu. He's a 4-star rider introduced alongside Huyan Zhuo in the current Halloween event. Unlike the assassin of Mao Liang, however, he's not a limited servant. So if you get 1 or 2 or 20 while rolling for Huyan Zhuo or concert use ass, you can expect even more down the road. Does any of this make him good though? That's the real question, isn't it? First up on Huang Feihu's skill list, we have Prince Wu Cheng. This is a 3-turn party arts and buster buff. It also gives Feihu the governing Prince Wu Cheng property for that same duration. This is a very unusual effect that actually changes his alignment from chaotic to lawful. Alignment affecting abilities are fairly rare in this game. Pity it doesn't work on the whole team though. Skill the second is Divine Golden-Eyed Warbler. This grants Huang Feihu guts and 20% charge per turn. There's also a third effect which changes depending on whether he's lawful or chaotic. If chaotic, he gets a substantial NP gain buff. If lawful, he gets the same magnitude of crit damage. Hypothetically, this means there's a tactical choice to be made about sequencing his first and second skills. We'll see if that's a relevant consideration a bit later, but I will note that Prince Wu Cheng has a single turn shorter cooldown than Warbler, so if you're using them over the course of a longer fight, odds are you'll end up being lawful on subsequent activations. The last of Feihu's regular skills is 5-colored Divine Ox. This grants him 3 turns of attack, crit damage, and stars per turn. Pretty straightforward. Now we come to the Noble Phantasm, Huang Feihu's 5 checkpoint resistance, Tianhua's Sword of Moyi. This lets you special summon 1 Sword Soul token, a level 4 shit. Hold on. This is a single target buster attack with no other fixed properties. Its overcharge, however, does grant a 3-turn rainbow buff. The bad news is that it's a very modest magnitude, 10% by default. At the end of the day, this NP is the root of Huang Feihu's misfortune. First of all, the damage on this isn't terribly impressive for a 4-star rider. At equivalent NP levels, it will outperform Cindereli's by a small margin. But remember that Cindereli is a welfare servant. Not just a welfare servant, but one that came out last year. It takes an NP4 Feihu to match an NP5 Ellie. And get this, she has an anti-buff in their kit that lets her spike her damage against wild beasts. Huang Feihu's kit is generic, so in terms of strategic account building, there really is no reason to go for him when you already have Cindereli. The fact that Sword of Moyi is a buster NP compounds his woes. Yeah, his overcharge might suck at 100%, but it hypothetically ramps up to a real buff by turn 3. But Huang Feihu is a buster servant with no true battery, only his charge per turn effect, so he's dependent primarily on his face cards to accomplish this. I'd wager that's the reason why Golden-Eyed Warbler has NP gain on its chaotic effect. But realistically speaking, you should always use Prince Wu Cheng first to gain the lawful crit damage effect instead. He's got more relevant tools for that application. One way you can play him, for instance, is to run him with the usual 2 Koi and Skayas. They take care of his crit star needs on turn 1, and if you ever need to fill out a chain, you can have them charge his NP once, or maybe even twice. If you give your supports a star generating CE like Fragment of 2030, they can combo off with 5-colored Divine Ox to give Feihu some gas on subsequent turns. You can even supplement this by equipping them with flat star command codes like Holy Knight's Aurora. Any NPs after the initial pair should be treated as a bonus to activate his Brave Chain and get a small residual buff. This whole idea of deciding between NP gain and crit damage strikes me as a bit half-cooked. An art servant would always pick NP gain, and a buster servant would almost always take crit damage. I think a quick servant is the only one where switching between the two is a realistic consideration. Really, they should have just given Feihu a quick NP with 2 or 3 buster cards instead. What I'm about to say isn't the least bit practical, but being able to change alignments means that, hypothetically, Feihu can sponge off multiple categories of alignment buffs. What would that look like? Well, the obvious starting point is Doman, who grants attack and crit damage. Naturally. That's the only notable chaotic support effect. What about lawful? Well, we have Gilles de Rais. Saber Gilles. You'll have to wait a few years because he just got the buff on JP recently, but it gives 3 turns of crit damage to that specific alignment. And get this, it also gives a 2-tier overcharge to good aligned allies, which Feihu is. All of a sudden, that NP looks a bit less shit. Okay, what about the other good alignment buffs? First of all, how'd you know there are other good aligned buffs? Who the fuck uses those, you maniac? But to answer the question, there are 2 others with offensive applications. Anderson gives star generation and Jar Jar gives attack. Wait a second. A Jean. Well, Gilles has his Jean buff, so just run the 2 together, right? Not so, dear friend. Saber Gilles doesn't have a Jean buff per se. He has a lawful, good, and star attribute buff, which is a package of tags that match the original Jeanne d'Arc. But Summer Jeanne isn't lawful good. She's lawful summer, so there goes the overcharge. And she's human attribute instead of star. There goes the star dump. That aside, what's the sum total of this buff mega package? Not much. Certainly not enough to justify running a team across that many card types with no targeted charge to give Huang Feihu. There is one option that I didn't mention for alignment supports, and that's our good friend Fake Liz. 9 Tattoo Eliza has a similar split between crit damage for lawful allies and NP gain for chaotic allies, suggesting that element of her kit was at least partially made with Huang Feihu in mind. But again, not really much reason to use that chaotic buff with him. So if you're gonna run the two together, I'd sequence it so that he activates Prince Wu Cheng before you do anything with Eliza. For CEs, you have two notable options in my book. The first is Dancing on Lotus Blossoms, which is a free craft essence from the Mao Liang event, and a pretty solid one at that. But if you were around for it, the first day of filming gives you Starting Charge and a Buster buff to leverage for some faster action. Huang Feihu isn't awful in a vacuum, but he is very underwhelming when you consider both the wealth of alternatives and the half-hearted nature of his gimmick. Barely keeping pace against a somewhat recent welfare doesn't make him look particularly good, and changing alignments doesn't amount to much between the somewhat limited scope of alignment-based supports and his kit heavily favoring the crit damage option. This servant could have used a bit more time in the oven. Now normally this is where I'd launch into the mythology of today's subject, but I am the victim of a tremendous misfortune. That misfortune is a not-so-little book called The Investiture of the Gods. It's a cornerstone of FGO's Chinese and Chinese-adjacent roster, being the source for Taigong Wang, Neza, Tamamo's Daji-related aspects, and Tai Sui Xingjun. I've covered Tai Sui's story in the Servant Guide, and anyone who's watched that will remember what a mess it was. How do I put this? Reading The Investiture of the Gods is like trying to understand a shonen power battle series just by reading summaries on a wiki. Except that's the source material. It's battle after battle presented in the driest way possible. An absolutely unbearable read. So yeah, fuck that. Look, maybe I can do like an Investiture of the Gods super summary down the road, just rip off the band-aid and cover everyone at once, but that day is not today. But lucky for you, I do know a little about Huang Feihu's story already, thanks to a little anime called Hoshin Engi. The 90s one, not the 2018 series that looks all washed out like it belonged on the shelf next to Peace Hame. My point is that, as an adaptation of Investiture of the Gods, enough of the story carried over that I could watch it without wanting to do a Lady Jia impression. Who's Lady Jia? That would be Huang Feihu's wife. Apparently a very beautiful woman. Certainly Huang Feihu thought so. Guy had like 4 kids. Well, apparently the last king of the Shang dynasty thought so too. He wanted a piece of the action, and, egged on by sadistic lover Daji, attempted to do so by force. Cornered, Lady Jia took her own life before she could suffer any indignity. Terrible news for Feihu. It gets worse though. His sister was in the palace as a concubine for the king, and, horrified, rebukes him for his evil intentions. King Zhou takes this well. By which I mean he throws her off a building to her death. Now that the king has done everything in his power to burn this bridge, Huang Feihu rebels, joining the founder of the future Zhou dynasty in a series of campaigns against his former liege. That's the extent of what I remember. Apparently he dies in the book and is invested as a god by Taigong Wang, which explains why he's divine in Fate Grand Order. This has all been a bit slim for my liking, but I hope you can all forgive me for not wanting to read The Cure for Insomnia again. Thanks for watching, lads. Like if you enjoyed this video, subscribe for more, and come on twitch.tv/Finotaisen where I stream every week, Wednesday and then Friday through Sunday. This week I've got FTL, Faster Than Light on Wednesday, Resident Evil 6 co-op on Friday, Team Fortress 2 on Saturday, and FGO on Sunday. The boys and I are having a bit of a contest to see if they can force me to roll for more copies of Huyan Zhuo, so if you want to see how that turns out, you'll want to be there. Till next time.